Good morning, everyone. This is another session of Women in Science, and I have the honor, the privilege, the luck of having with us today Commissioner Maria Elena Giner. Thank you very much for making the time on your busy agenda, on your schedule, on all the commitments that you have to comply these days. So thank you for being with us with the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters, and I'm going to really enjoy these 20 or so minutes with you to talk about women, to talk about science, and your role as the leader now of the waters between Mexico and the US. So thank you for being here. I'm going to quickly introduce you to our audience and then let you do your presentation yourself.
Thank you, Rosario. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Maria Elena, thank you. President Joe Biden in August 2021 appointed Maria Elena Giner to serve as the United States Commissioner of the International Boundary and Water Commission, United States and Mexico. Very proud to have you here. Dr. Giner, the second woman and first Latina to hold the post. So, yay for that. She previously served as the General Manager of the Border Environment Cooperation Commission, usually called BEC, an institution that developed environmental infrastructure along the US-Mexico border in association with the North American Development Bank. During her tenure at the BEC, she focused on policies that address US-Mexico cooperation on water, energy, and climate change. Big words. Dr. Giner is well regarded among state agencies and local communities in all the border region, in all the 10 states, US and Mexico. In addition, she has published extensively on water policy and transboundary bilateral cooperation. Dr. Giner's education includes a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Loyola Marymount University, a Master of Business Administration from the University of Texas, El Paso, and a PhD in Public Policy from the University of Texas at Austin. So you've been busy. She's also a registered professional engineer, first-generation college graduate, and daughter of an immigrant. She's bicultural and bilingual. Just to give a little bit of background of the International Boundary and Water Commission, this commission is responsible for applying the boundary and water treaties between the two countries and settling differences that arise in their application. The Commission operates and maintains floods control levees, international storage reservoirs, the diversion dams, water treatment plants, and boundary monuments at various locations at the US-Mexico border. Thank you, Commissioner, for being with us today.
Thank you, Rosario. It's really an honor to be here and to be considered a woman in science. That's not necessarily the case sometimes, I feel, since I do so much related to the interacting with the public and stakeholder engagement. But ultimately, science is the basis for a lot of the work that we do along the US-Mexico border related to water and water supply.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So let's get comfortable. Let's get fresh. It's early morning and it's time to get inspired. And I'm going to start by talking with you regarding your professional career first. Over the time, I just read your very short biography of what you have done on your career. If you had only 2 minutes to describe it, I mean, what would you say? What has been your career like in 2 minutes?
I think, well, you described my credentials for sure, right? And so just to add to the fact that of my background, I think my education goes beyond just where I went to school or in my career, but it actually started with me. I actually spent some very formative years living in Ciudad Juarez. My parents had grocery stores. And I think one of the basis for why I went into infrastructure was, one, I loved math. Two, I went to an all-girls Catholic school, Loretto Academy, Go Angels, in El Paso, Texas. And there was a nun, Sister Frances Bechtold. And these Loretto sisters were pioneers in education in women. And so this particular nun really inspired me to become an engineer. that combined with living in Ciudad Juarez and not having power or water every day, 24 hours a day, was something that I think really motivated me to understand the role of infrastructure in day-to-day living. Of course, I went to Los Angeles, got my degree in civil engineering at Loyola Marymount University, go Lions. And then I worked in utilities, I worked in a design firm, but then I came back to serve the border. And I worked for Beck, as you mentioned, and I think I was there for 20 years. And I think one of the joys that I brought was bringing first-time sanitation to many communities along the U.S. Mexico border, sometimes even first-time water. During that time, when I led the organization, we brought in $9 billion worth of funding for over 100 communities that benefited 10 million residents for sanitation, water, roads, clean energy. And a statistic I like to use is that when I started at the Beck, Mexican communities had on the border only had 26% of them had wastewater service. By the time I left, that was into the 90%. I left in 2017. So a lot of infrastructure went in, a lot of collaboration went into this effort, because the hardest part of projects is not always the science sometimes, unfortunately. It's the legal, it's the people, it's the variable of people, right? So it's the legal, it's the financial, it's the public embracement related to it, right? So and when I got there as well, there were 300,000 people in the Texas colonias that didn't have sanitation either. And by the time I left in 2017, about 200,000 people of those people had sanitation. And these were all projects that I worked in. And so I think if I were to describe my background and my professional background, it is about servant leadership, and it is about understanding that my engineering degree, my MBA, and more recently my PhD were tools that I was able to have the privilege of having, of course, with hard work on my end, to be able to achieve this. And there's a lot of shoulders I stood on to get to that point.
Thank you. That was 2 minutes, but
Wow.
I'm sure but I'm sure it took you much more than that. And I agree with you. It's always at the end, it's always the decision is based on people's, needs, even emotions, values. I mean, it really depends. The variable of people is really, really underestimated at the very end of the decision-making process. Anyway, now, as a woman, and having done all that you did as a professional, how would you describe your experience as a woman? Just forget about what you're able to accomplish as a professional and just think about your role as a woman.
So certainly when they say in STEM there aren't a lot of women, it is true. It is true. I think maybe 10 to 15% of my civil engineering class, maybe at most 20, were women. But was really more stark was when I went to go work in the utility world. I worked for Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and I worked as an intern, and then I worked for Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. And then I also worked as a design engineer. And in those early years, I was really amazed at how, up until recently, actually, I was either the only woman and or the youngest woman. And I'm 55 years old. So when you're in your 40s and you're still one of the younger women, it really says a lot about kind of the investment of mentoring women to move into these fields. Now I'm mentoring a group of women from my alma mater, from Loyola Marymount University, and it's really amazing to see how many young women are now going into science. And I think we're reaching a point where it's going to start, the gender balance will start to become more balanced, right? So, but as a woman, one of the things that I think I I really experienced early in my career, and even up until probably 10 years ago, is what I call imposter syndrome, right? Where you think you're there, men have no problem saying what they're thinking, and you're putting you feel you're putting yourself out there by putting out your opinion. And many times you're like, are they going to find out? Are they going to respect me? Are they going to understand that I really know something, right? And that went into my 40s. So I think it's just something I learned to manage and have the courage to confront, is when I feel that little sense of insecurity that I call imposter syndrome, I just, blaze through it and try and give my opinion. And then at the end, I'm like, wow, my opinion made a difference in the decisions that were being made. So I think that career as a woman is really being able to manage those fears.
Strong fears. I'm going to share something quickly with you. When I got my last job, I was pregnant, 9 months pregnant. And I was just sharing with a friend that I got a new job. And she said, how come you're a woman, you're Latina, and you're pregnant, and you got a new job?
Yeah.
Like it was kind of, okay, how is that possible?
Right.
So, I'm going to ask you this. I mean, you describe as a professional, as a woman, you are an immigrant daughter. You are a Latina origin. So how, that's a different role, right? That's another.
Right.
How do you, what's your experience being in science? The few ones in science, the few one women, the few one Latina also. How does that play?
So it's really interesting because I do get that question a lot, as far as how did I feel being a woman of color. I think I'm very privileged in that my parents, they had a business, and they had supermarkets in Mexico, and they did include us in a lot of the business decisions that we made. I was a cashier during my high school years. And what they sent a really good example for me of just working hard. I tell people that my parents were probably one of the hardest working people I'd ever known, right? And so because of that, they set an example for us. And for me, when I felt that I wasn't being listened to, I just pushed forward and I just worked harder. And working both in Mexico and the United States, I mean, I really felt that I really had to make a place for myself. And I learned that the way to make a place for myself was to show results, and to follow up on my word, and always define what the outcome we want to achieve and all of the actions that need to be taken, and just follow it step by step, showing results. And so I think that was really, really useful. And it's funny because I think that when you're a mom, I have three girls, I have three daughters, and you're in a professional world, you always have to be multitasking. You always have to be thinking about, parallel paths for so many things. And because you want to get an outcome, with whether it's, getting through elementary school, or just getting through the year, or getting them through the college application process, right? Those are all things that you have to do in parallel with working, helping your kids with that while working on and advancing your career. So I think that those parallel paths are really good skills that we develop, that we can apply and continue to apply even once, we're approaching, I'm approaching empty nesting. And so in that sense, I tell young moms, who aren't sleeping well, who aren't eating well, who are only identified by the mother, named as the mother of their child, right? So you go to events and they say, this is the mother of X, or this is the, and so you lose a little bit of your identity during that time, right? But one of the things that I tell young moms, I said, I promise you love your kids, but I promise you it will get better as they get older. It will get easier as they get older. You still have to plan, you still have to strategize. And then, if you have a husband as well, maintaining those relationships, it takes work as well. So again, you have the parallel path of your kids, you have the parallel path of your spouse or your significant other, you have the parallel path of your career, and your career is like a work family as well, right? So you're maintaining all these relationships during this process, all in parallel, so that you can advance. And one of the questions that I get a lot with regards to that, young moms like you, Rosario, who was 9 months pregnant when you got your first job, is how do you deal with the guilt? How do you manage this work-life balance, right? Where you have your work family, you've got your home family. And I tell them, you involve your kids in as much of your events that you can, but one day when your kids are bragging about who you are, they're in elementary school and they want you to come and talk to their class, or they're in high school and you're there at their career fair, and you think all of a sudden you realize that guilt is gone. You don't know when it left, but that guilt is gone, right? And you've done your job and being an example for your children, but as well as their friends. I still have friends of my children that come up to me and say, I became an environmental engineer because of you, because of what you told me it was about, right? Or I became this type of engineer, or I went into public service because I saw you talk about being in public service, and I said that's what I want to do. So just being that example, being that example as a woman, working hard and showing to others that it can be done.
You're very optimistic. Without this background here, you will see my real life.
Yeah, trust me, it gets better. It gets better. Trust me.
Okay. I'm crossing fingers. I'm trusting in you completely that it will get better. But you know what? The guilt part is true. It's always there, like like a shadow. But still, this more than anyone. We have a responsibility. I mean, as a person, as a professional, as a academia, as a science, you as a policy and a scientific as well, we have a responsibility with our communities.
Right.
And we need to take care of that. I mean, we have to do something, right? The world needs us. And I don't want to sound like a cliche or anything, but really, it is our responsibility too. So it is not one or the other. We need to do both.
And we stood on a lot of shoulders. We stood on a lot of shoulders, and I'm hoping others will use my shoulders to stand on as they advance in their career, right? And so yes, there is a deep sense of responsibility. And it's funny because when I meet with stakeholders and I tell them, there's two things you can count on me. I tell them is servant leadership, which is empathy, which is the basis of empathy, is really understanding what the issue is. But on top of that, I tell them I live with permanent Catholic guilt. That permanent Catholic guilt is going to push me to really solve these issues, or else I will not. That guilt has never gone away. The guilt with my children went away, but not my Catholic guilt. So in that sense of responsibility definitely runs deep inside of me as well.
Yeah, exactly. As my husband keeps telling, I mean, you're not going to lead by reputation. And so, well, we need to do something. Somebody has to do something, right? So it feels good at the end. It really pays back, and I know you feel that every day. So okay, going backwards, what would you change?
What would I change? I think that so I am not a person that lives with regret. I'm a person that really feels like as I move forward, I've done the best that I can with the tools that I have in hand. And I really feel that about many of the people that surround me. But I think that if I had to go back and do a do-over, I'd probably have been more involved with my alma maters on mentoring young women in science, right? I'm doing that now. It's something I've started in the last couple of years, is starting to really consider that role of mentoring, and more formally, this last year, I've started to mentor students as well in their capstone projects, as well as in their career. And whenever I get requests for meetings from universities or for me to talk, I always say yes. I always say yes, because I think if I can speak to one or two people in there, especially women of color, all kinds of first generation college educated, because they're not all people of color, first generation college educated, right? I am a first generation college educated. For them to advance, because that's how you address issues of poverty, is through education, right? We all know that. And so the more I can promote somebody to get more of an education, whether it be in trade skills or whether it be in engineering, it really motivates me. But I think that's one of the things that if I had to look back, what I would do. But I'm still young enough to know, okay, I didn't do it back then. We're not going to live with regret. Let's see what I can do now.
Yeah, that's true.
So
We always do.
Guilty, Rosario, that you can't do it now, because trust me, you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not doing physical exercise. So do not feel any guilt about that right now.
I'm not doing it, and it's just next to my bed, like watching me, like waiting for me forever. I'll be there. I'll be there. Eventually, I'll be there. Now, and when you've talked a lot about women and young women and the youth today, I've been reading recently that our youth audiences, communities, especially in the border, are suffering a lot. There's a lot of anxiety out there. There's a lot of misinformation too out there. There's a lot of water challenges, climate challenges, everything that we're facing, that we deal with every day. And sometimes, I mean, we underestimate that the young population can actually do something, and they are looking and searching for ways to make a difference, right? To make a change. But sometimes they just can't find it. It's just too big. The challenges are just too big. And that creates anxiety in our kids, because they're still kids. So knowing that, what will be your message? I mean, for them, not just women, I want to talk now more about young professionals out there, because the anxiety part, the what to do, what is going to happen in the next 20, 30 years in terms of water, for example, in the border region. I mean, what will be your message to them? How can they help?
So I think climate is something that young kids hear a lot about, right? And so I think they're in a position, especially young kids, that say, what can I do? What can I do? Right? I don't have a career. I'm not a decision maker. I live in my parents' home, right? What can I do? And I think one of the things I tell people is that information is power. Find information on what's making you anxious, right? And if it's a medical situation, you need to get medical assistance, right? So that's one. But if it's if it's anxiety based on a sense of helplessness, that will to a certain degree gives you this feeling like I need to do something, then find an organization, find a club, find a weekend event. Every little bit counts, because if you start small now, as you get older, you will only build upon that. Okay. So I'll give you an example, right? A young person can go and do, schools have cleanup days, cleaning up, a river or an arroyo, or, yes, maybe it's going to get dirty again in a month, but that's the start. In that cleanup day, you're going to make a network of friends. You're going to make people, it's going to be something that you can put on your resume, and you build upon that. Then maybe the next time you manage or you organize a cleanup day. Maybe later on you work for a nonprofit. Maybe later on you work for you work in public service. So really volunteering, either through clubs, is how you find your voice. And also, information educate yourself on what is causing you to have angst. And based on that, you'll find things that you can do. I go back to kids and I say, what can you do as a high school student knowing that there's a climate issue? Well, there's 10 things you can do. Carry a water bottle. A lot of kids already do that, right? Don't leave your cord plugged in because that uses energy without it having a phone on the other end, right? Going back to the old, things of turning off lights, not letting the water run extensive periods of time, right? Using your same glass that you're drinking water out of all day, every day, right? So those are little things that can be recycling. If your parents aren't using bags, reusable bags, then you take charge of putting them in the car for them, because half the time they probably forget to put them in the car, right? And so those are habits that if you start young, they will lead to a lifetime of being of advocating for the environment and of being somebody that's purpose driven.
And now that you mention it, in the forum, we are developing this partnership to reach out the young population in the border, or high school and middle school children in the border, to get involved in a way that they get reliable information, useful information that could calm a little bit that anxiety, and they can be part of the solution and not just isolate themselves into somebody else is going to make the decision for me anyways. So we are working towards that, and that hopefully will be developed soon. And this should be, should be impacting both sides of the border. Anyway, but thank you for bringing that up. And just to close up, what are you most proud of? Because you have a lot of things to be proud of.
Yeah.
So if you had to choose, what are you most proud of as a woman, as a professional, as a mother,
right,
as a leader?
Right. So it's really interesting because one of the things that my parents are most proud of is my accomplishments, right? My accomplishments in the sense that, I've gotten all of these education. What I'm most proud of is I have raised three incredible, my husband and I are, we've been married almost 30 years, and we've created an incredible three daughters that are very driven towards servant leadership as well. One of them is aspiring to go to medical school. The other one is involved on the humanities, social justice type of one's a scientist. Actually, my oldest daughter is a scientist, and my other one is in the humanities field. My third one has intellectual disabilities, and so she's shown the world what it is to have empathy for somebody with intellectual disabilities, right? And so I think that we're very, very, I think what I'm most proud of are my children.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I'm leaving a next generation. I'm leaving a next generation of people that are hopefully going to continue this servant leadership and really strive to make a difference in the world, a positive difference in the world.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard. My kids are smaller than yours, but I'm betting on them.
Well, you're leading by example, Rosario. You are leading by example, and so I tell moms, share your job with your kids. I would take my daughters to public meetings. I would take them to the office. I would take them on also the cool parts of my job. They went to Marseille to the World Water Forum, and they've got to other places where I've made presentations. And so they're proud. They get to see what I do and how I speak, and take them to work. And I know now in this world of a lot of remote, there's a lot of remote, right? But there is sometimes, in-person events, take them, even if it's around a family vacation where they're only there a short amount of time, but expose them to those things, expose them. When you go speak at a university, take them with you, have them sit in the audience.
Oh
Right
my
now
God.
yours are still young, but your oldest one is not that young. So
I know, but it's still a risk though. I mean,
it is a risk. It is a risk. It is a risk.
it is a risk.
I remember one time when I was potty training my oldest daughter, taking her to a meeting and her coming up to me and saying she had to go to the restroom. And I said, give me a moment. I took her to the restroom. I came back and all was good. People understood. I had forgotten
Yeah.
about that story actually.
Oh, yeah, I mean, first things first, right? It's always first things first. And people understand that because we all face the same issues every day. I mean, we all have a
I
family.
want to know how real you are, how human you are. They want to understand that you empathize and showing that those challenges really makes you, identify. They start to identify with you as well.
Yes, that is true. And we need to get them involved too. And I can tell you, I mean, my kids know what I do. They actually know too much. So
Yeah.
that it's scary now.
And I think the other piece of advice that I give people is that sometimes when you encounter people that are angry, you got to let them vent. You got to even if it's with you. And it adds to the empathy and understanding. There's always a little bit of information that you learn from them that something is not right and something needs to be done. And so that also empowers you to get that information so that you may not agree with where they're coming from, but you start to understand what their challenges are. Because I believe that all of us, what we want to do is, have fair wages. We want to be able to live in a world where we have a roof over our heads, running water, electricity, the comforts of life that are, to me, are basic human needs.
Yes, we all have a world in our head, right?
Right.
And our priorities too. Commissioner Maria Elena, thank you very much for sharing this time with me and with the forum, even with the reporter community. And more than that, because it's going to go wild and crazy on social media. So it's going to go beyond that. Thank you for sharing your life, your empathy. I think that's the greatest part of you. You should be very proud of that too.
Well, thank you, Rosario. Unfortunately, we didn't talk about science at all, but I'm hoping we talked about the science of humanity, right? And how the great variable of humanity is what we're trying to manage. And no, thank you. It's really been truly an honor for me to be here, to be considered a woman of science, and truly an honor to be with you. You will go far, Dr. Rosario Sanchez. You will go far with your knowledge and your experience and the sharing of bringing together many of us to come and share our story. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. We're here for the same. We're here for the same reason. So thank you, everyone. I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to follow us on our social media. And thank you again. Felices Pascuas y adiós.
Adiós.